All right, man, peace. So now this is going to be part two on the Colin Kaepernick book deal issue. Stephen A is in the midst of a soliloquy. Let's see what else he has to say.
There are a lot of people in our society that do that, which fuels the frustration. Well, let me finish. Which fuels the frustration of a disenfranchised community. For example, hypothetically speaking, there are times where you have black folks that might say something's racist. Now, they might be wrong about a particular instance, but there might be 5 to 10 other examples that are accurate. You might know it's accurate, but when you hear them say it, all of a sudden you're like, well, give me an example.
Okay,
you know the damn example.
This once again is the circular conversation that I've constantly been lamenting in regards to the liberal black and their fruitless and incessant need to engage with the Caucasian, who they already know is going to answer a certain way. So if you know that the Caucasian is going to use those type of tactics, why do you continuously choose to want to engage in conversation with them? Unless somehow you're hoping for a breakthrough or an admission that will make you feel validated by getting that breakthrough. Look, man, the psychological issues with the so-called black man and black woman in America are very pervasive. And it's very unfortunate because they don't see it a lot of times. And when I say the black man and black woman, obviously I'm not talking about everybody. Just the majority of our people, they have this mindset. And a lot of it was really solidified during the Martin Luther King movement, which was socialist/communist in nature. And once again, based in globalism. When you hear globalism or one world, that's what it's talking about. It's talking about socialists slash communists. Bring everybody together, really just Luciferianism.
Damn,
hold on. Okay.
That's frustrating.
You want me to submit to your generalizations without rebutting your specifics. So first of all, let me say,
Hold on.
Am I being unfair? I don't think I am. I understand, first of all, Max, that there's a role for books in this world, and I like to think I'm a big consumer of books, and there's a worthiness of putting intellectual ideas down on books. But I also think your ideas need to be tested, and I don't think Kaepernick has shown a willingness or an ability to test his ideas, in particular, him. That doesn't mean I don't think there is an issue to be discussed, an issue to be read about, an issue to be understood on a larger basis, but...
Yes, and a person like Will Cain will look to research these issues or these lamentations by so-called blacks so that he can find a way to refute them. Because underneath a lot of his bluster, he does not believe that the complaints of most blacks is legitimate. He's a firm believer, a little bit like a Skip Bayless, that America is a pie, and either you want to take your slice or you don't. He does believe that. He does not believe that most of the complaints of the so-called black man and woman are legitimate. And let me say this. In my view, and I've already stated this, most of the complaints of the so-called black man and black woman are really based in acceptance, not direct issues. Because our people are so infatuated with the acceptance of the Caucasian, it stops them from really being able to address the real issues. All right, the real issues being culture and knowledge of history, and idolatry. That also is probably the most major issue, is idolatry. Because our people put white people on a pedestal and they put women on a pedestal. And, what that does is that totally hamstrings the so-called black man from being the leader that he's supposed to be.
But Colin Kaepernick, I'm not being unfair to Stephen A. I don't think as an individual whose voice matters in this debate, is someone I'm being unfair to. And as to whether or not I'm being obtuse, and not just me, anybody, right? Or I'm being unfair by questioning specifics, and it negates the idea that there might be... I'll give you the perfect example. I think Michael Bennett's story of what happened in Las Vegas should be questioned, criticized, skeptical over, and ultimately judged when the facts don't come back to support him. But
well, of course, we already know that didn't happen. That story pretty much just went away once the footage was revealed to show that there was nothing wrong with the police arrest protocol that was executed there. Why is that? Because once again, Michael Bennett is another provocateur and another pawn of the liberal media. That's all he is. And as I've already stated, we live in the surveillance age, and it's much more difficult to execute these attempts at provocation than they were in years past, in decades past. All right. You had a Caucasian couple named the Bradens, Bradens, Carl and Ann Braden, and they were professional socialist provocateurs during the so-called civil rights era. They would burn down houses, and they would claim that the Ku Klux Klan did it. They would burn down black people's houses, and then they would claim that the Ku Klux Klan did it, because they were executing, or utilizing, I should say, the Hegelian dialectic.
But that doesn't mean that I don't believe there's racism in the United States of America. And I think if we're going to go about our business here saying, don't check people on specifics, don't check their...
But that's not what I'm saying. That's not what I'm saying, Will. Hold on, Max. What I'm saying to you is this. Will, if Colin Kaepernick comes out from day one and he says inequality, oppression, and police brutality are issues that are near and dear to me, that's why I'm kneeling. I don't think that further elaboration is necessary from him. There are people, there are plenty of folks out there who are far more educated.
But he's the one with the $1 million book deal.
Let me explain. There are people out there in the black community far more educated than Colin Kaepernick who can take exactly what he said and validate his concern.
No doubt.
So if that's the truth, then why does he need to? When they can validate
Max,
that.
Will, hold your thought.
Well, the reason why he needs to do that, Stephen A., is because he's been set up as a leader. If he does not want to be answerable to quantify a lot of his allegations, then he should step down in the position that he's in. He should say, you know what, I'm not really qualified to speak on these issues. And really, furthermore, he should not be involved with writing a book. I think that writing a book is directly associated and affiliated with a stance that I'm the one who started this, I'm the one who is the leader of this, and I'm the one who's going to monetize it. It's kind of hard to say that other people are more qualified to speak on the issue, but Colin Kaepernick should be the figurehead. That doesn't really coalesce very well.
Your thoughts. This is too good. We want to stay with this subject. We will be right back. More First Take after the break. Hey, welcome back into First Take. We were just getting started on Colin Kaepernick's potential book deal, having a nice, healthy conversation with the fellas. Max, you were ready to chime in. Go ahead.
Well, Kaepernick is a football player, not a public orator. And yes, a football player may get help writing a book, clarifying his thoughts, expressing them plainly. Look, Will, you and I were having a debate the other day. You were saying one of my pet points is I think this whole flag thing comes down to protections in terms of speech in the workplace, and that's kind of a fetish of mine to talk about on the air. And in fact, that's not actually what's necessarily germane here. And I might respond to you something like, well, actually, I think it is, because if we're celebrating this country, if you're African American, you may not want to celebrate the history. That's not so great if you're African American, most of it. In fact, a lot of it's extremely terrible, like some of the worst stuff that has ever happened in the history of Earth.
Here we go with his normal white liberal violin playing again. My thing is this: if he truly believes most of what he says, how come he doesn't empty his bank account and give it to the first black homeless man that he finds? Right, Max Kellerman. Once again, if you truly believe in how dastardly the conduct of your ancestors was towards the so-called black man, it's very simple. Empty your bank account and sign over the deed to your house to the first homeless black man that you find. All right, and just move on with your life, and you could have a clean conscience.
As a result of the United States government and its behavior. And therefore, if you say, no, just love the country because you're from here, that's nationalistic, not really patriotic. Just love it because you're here. Why? What is there to love about it, right? But you might love the fact that you are free, or you're supposed to be. And those protections extend to places, including the workplace, as we saw in the Civil Rights Act of 1964. And that's the reason. You can say what you want, and that's the reason.
No, sir. That's a complete and utter lie. We all know that you cannot say what you want, just like you can't say what you want. Like, for example, when you got suspended, when you confessed that you hit your woman, at the time your wife now, in the aftermath of the Ray Rice incident, you claimed, or you stated, I shouldn't say that you claimed, you stated that you hit your woman at a party, and ESPN decided to suspend you for a certain period of time because they thought that your comment was inappropriate. So we all know that, you cannot say what you want. We're working in a corporate society. When people go to their job, they're working in sub-corporations of the overall corporate society known as America, or the United States, I should say. And no, you cannot say what you want because, you're just an asset, all right, and a debt slave. That's what you are, period. So the Constitution, it affords certain liberties. What the Constitution basically says is that if you say something, you don't have the right to be arrested for it. It does not mean that you have the right to be gainfully employed. And anybody knows that. If you go to your job and you stand in the middle of the hallway or in the middle of the conference room and say, I hate faggots, you're most likely going to be fired. Right? If you stand in the middle of the office and say, bitches ain't shit, you're going to be fired. Okay? That's basically how it goes.
You love this country. That's a damn good one. If you're anyone, including if you're African American, and maybe therefore First Amendment protections are especially important to this issue. I may make some argument like that, let's say. And in fact, I do make that argument. And I don't think Colin Kaepernick is incapable of thinking or speaking. But I do not think he can think or speak like I can. Because this is my job. It's how I make a living. I'll do it all the time. I'm good at it.
No, sir. The reason why you don't think that Colin Kaepernick can think or speak like you is because you think that you're smarter than you really are. The same way that you did with Kyrie Irving. The main difference between you and Colin Kaepernick is you're much more accustomed to running your mouth. For the most part, you speak without any knowledge of facts. You have really no handle on history. But you believe that you can bullshit your way through any conversation because you have the complexion for the connection. And words flow out of your mouth rather smoothly. Just because something is smooth doesn't mean that it's accurate.
That's why I have the job. I can't play football like...
Look at the face Stephen A. made. Stephen A. like, no, actually you have the job because, the boss has told me to hire your ass.
Like Colin Kaepernick, right? So to insist that he comes and subjects his ideas here to the same rigor in real time as a public order that I do or Stephen A. does or you do is not necessarily part of the requirements of him holding his positions. All right.
Well, you must have felt a certain way that he needed to represent his thoughts because you kept begging him to come on the show. And you, by your own admission, even earlier in this segment, have stated that you wanted to know what Colin Kaepernick is really thinking. Now that you hear that the book deal is coming out, you have relented to a degree. Really because you know that Colin Kaepernick is not really fit to hold the station that he was trying to occupy. And you saw that this movement was petering out. And you needed a way, you needed a storyline to run to feed to the people who disagreed with you and who disagreed with the Kaepernick movement so that you could say, see, look, he's writing a book. So go read the book and we can see what his plans are. Or we can see where his mind was when he first decided to protest.
All right. Well, then if we want to hear from him, a book, therefore, makes a lot of sense.
It makes a lot of sense because you've chosen to defend him arbitrarily in this particular instance.
Agreed.
Or, in fact, in all instances. If I would suggest the definition of fair, Stephen A., the definition of fair is to take each one of these on their own basis and judge each instance on its own merits. I don't quite honestly understand how both of you can look at a situation and we can all agree Colin Kaepernick is a far superior quarterback than he is spokesman for a cause. He's not prepared to come on a show like First Take and defend his ideas against a check, against a rebuttal, against a test. Why does he therefore get a pass from you guys that just because he's somehow a great football player and he has said some few things on an issue, though therefore gets to be a writer and a scholar? Doesn't that same thing apply? I am the one being fair. He's not prepared to defend his ideas on the First Take. Hold on.
You just lied.
Hold on.
Okay,
and he's not prepared to be a writer and scholar and spokesman on the issue of this cause.
Come on after the book.
Wait a minute.
Come on, First Take after the book.
Max.
You see what Max Kellerman said? He said, come on, First Take after the book. I've already stated that is most likely what he plans to do. That is most likely going to be his reappearance to the masses is after the book comes out to publicize the book. And I'm sure that his handlers are going to coach all the people who interview him on what questions are okay to ask him as opposed to what questions are not okay to ask him. And I'm sure he's going to have a lot of sheen in his hair to look like, he's glowing like a Christ figure. So all the internet revolutionaries are going to say, oh, my God, he's back to save us.
I got this. First of all, Will,
Yeah.
you know good and damn well that everybody who authors books are not writers and scholars. Stop. You know better than that. You know that just
Not
as
everybody
well,
that writes a
if
book
not
should be
better
writing
than
a
me.
book.
No, wait a minute. Everybody that writes a book is not a scholar.
That's very true, but everybody who writes a book is not speaking on a societal issue that they should be able to qualify and quantify. Okay? Look, from the standpoint that Will Kane is coming from, I get some of his points. Okay? I get some of his points. At the end of the day, this is a cop-out for Kaepernick. It is a very shrewd cop-out by his handlers because they know that he's just a puppet. He's not built for that. He's not built for anything that is substantive or requires any form of depth in speaking. No, this is why the guy stood there. No, this is why the guy, he represents himself by T-shirts. He wears Muhammad Ali T-shirts and Malcolm X and Fidel Castro T-shirts. He's like a little college kid going through a phase where he wants to be, pro-blackity black and down for the cause and all these other things. It's like a phase that he missed when he was in college because he was too busy trying to follow around all those fraternity idiots. All right, and for the brothers who are in fraternities, look, it's no disrespect.
So nobody's accusing Colin Kaepernick of being that. Don't try that nonsense. That's number one. Number two, what was my original point to you? What I said was you were being unfair because the issues that he brought to light by taking a knee and announcing to the world why that is are things that can be validated by scholars and others from the African American community far more equipped to enunciate those and elocute those positions than him. So what you're doing is you're saying the fact that he was willing to take the knee and he was willing to say how he feels, he should be the one to have to elaborate extensively and intellectually on why he took that position when in fact there are others that can do it. I'll give you an example. Right here on First Take. Listen to me. Listen to me.
I agree with Will Kane on this. I mean, look, Muhammad Ali stood up for a certain cause, which really was his own right to not have to go to Vietnam because he was a Muslim minister. He went on talk show after talk show and he faced down all of his interviewers. And the reason why he was able to do that was because he was not looking to beat the Caucasian at his own game. He wasn't trying to point the finger at them and say, look, this is what you've done and this is what you have to apologize for. He went on talk shows and he said, look, I'm a member of the Nation of Islam and we believe that blacks should separate. And the Caucasian was disarmed by that, just as anybody is who thinks that they have people under control and then realizes that they have no control when that person does not want to associate with them anymore. That's when you get power. It's when you don't want to be around someone anymore. And that is one of the many differences between Ali and this current Colin Kaepernick narrative that they're trying to promote on the masses of internet revolutionaries and black people who really, quite frankly, probably don't even really know what's going on. But, there are also a lot of brothers who do know what's going on. All right. So that's the point. In this time period that we live in with the internet and, with platforms like YouTube, there are different avenues to attain information and hopefully more accurate information than what is being dispensed in the mainstream media. But I agree with Will Kane. He should have to represent himself because he is the figurehead. When Ali made the stand that he made, because they love to synchronize Ali with Kaepernick so much, Ali was first and foremost on the front lines to debate and defend his views and his stances.
Listen to me. I will, Max. Listen to me. There are times that I take positions on First Take. But what I religiously tell people, whether it's the Joe Madisons and the Karen Hunters or Dr. Michael Eric Dyson and others, what I religiously tell folks, I may touch on stuff from a surface perspective based on somebody who reads and pays attention and is socially conscious. But if you ask me about expertise, I will pass it off to those more qualified to talk about it because I know there are limits to what I can do in certain lanes that are not my own. Yeah,
but you know where your analogy is not really fitting, Stephen A., is that you stated that you will say something. Colin Kaepernick has not said anything. So basically, your statement is that you will speak on something to the extent and your ability to expound on it. And once you have exhausted that extent, then you pass it off to somebody else. Colin Kaepernick has not even really done that. All right. He's had some back and forth with certain reporters his last season with the 49ers. And basically, that was that. It really doesn't matter to me because I know he can't do anything for me anyway. He's not really equipped or qualified to assist anybody in anything other than the people who are using him.
There's nothing wrong with that, Will.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying is the unfair point.
Oh,
when
really?
you're acting like
really?
it's mandated,
Oh, really?
it should be mandated
I
that I
think
do
I'm
that.
the one being consistent here. He's not prepared to talk about it at
You're not
length
consistent.
or spontaneous. But you guys contend. You know what he is prepared to do? You know what he is qualified to do? Write
You're too
300
busy. You're
we
too
paid-
busy
well, let me
worried
ask
about
you,
this.
we paid
Will.
$1
You're too
million
busy
bucks
worried
to
about
write
what we
300
feel
pages.
instead of
Will,
saying
let me
what
ask
you
you this.
feel.
Let me
Go
ask
ahead,
you this.
Matt.
Do you think that you are more or less prepared to talk about something before or after you've written about it?
Oh, please. Look, man, Colin Kaepernick has had he's alleged to have had these views for well over a year. If he's sincere, he should be well researched enough on these ideologies to expound on them. Let's cut the bullshit out.
I would say you are more
I would
prepared to
say
talk about it after you've written about it. And in fact,
This is such a tail wagging the dog.
Absolutely. How could you be more equipped to talk about something after you've written about it? Isn't the whole premise of writing a book that you're knowledgeable about a subject? So should you not have been well versed in that topic before you wrote the book?
This is such nonsense. Colin Kaepernick's not prepared. He doesn't understand the issues. But let's give him $1 million and get 300 pages
what do you
of
mean, let's
expertise.
give him $1 million? The $1 million will be there if the market says it'll be there. What do you mean, let's give him $1 million?
Here's the question we're being asked,
Hey,
Max. I don't
Max,
care about the money he's got.
let Will laugh. Max, let Will laugh. At the end of the day, Matt, Will Kane, even you have to admit that in the black community, when police brutality or racial inequality or oppression are brought up, those are very legitimate subjects that the black community. Well, that's all Colin Kaepernick said. So what's the problem?
Stephen A., let me tell you something. The question we're being asked, the question we're talking about, is whether or not Colin Kaepernick has found the perfect forum to get his ideas out. Now, what I would tell you is, and I appreciate you not boxing me. Hold on.
What do you mean, what ideas? You already stated the ideas. What you allege to be police brutality and so on and so forth. Why are you trying to act obtuse now off of his question, Stephen A.?
Hold on. I appreciate you not boxing me into the corner of suggesting these issues don't exist by saying Colin Kaepernick's not the great spokesman for it. I'd rather read a book by Michael Eric Dyson or Mark Lamont Hill on these issues, or for that matter, Stephen A. Smith.
You should.
Or for that matter, Stephen A. Smith and Bomani Jones. People that know much more, have a much greater grasp of this issue. And I am the one here to tell you, the fair position is not, you know what, he probably couldn't do it in 5 minutes on TV, so I'll tell you the perfect forum. 300 pages.
I'd like to say something.
But you know what? Will Kane is touching on something that is very, very relevant, and that is the deification of the black athlete in this society. You know, it is amazing that somebody will take Colin Kaepernick's book seriously just because he plays quarterback for the 49ers, and this is a guy writing a book on race, allegedly. Well, I shouldn't say he's writing a book on race. I'm sure that the book will really just entail his life experiences, and the racial aspect will be a major part. They're going to play up the interracial union between his mother and whoever his father is, as well as him being raised by a Caucasian family, culminating in his quote-unquote stand to kneel against racism in America. So race is going to play a major part, but I'm sure the book is pretty much going to center around his life.
I'd like to say something to the kids who might be watching. Kids, if you feel strongly about something, if an idea appeals to you and you think it's right, and when discussing it with others, when publicly discussing it, it is rebutted, that idea, by things that you find hard to rebut yourself, but you still feel you're right. And maybe you even have a sense of why, you have the thoughts as to why you are right, but it's difficult to articulate them. Then, kids, I highly recommend sitting down and putting pen to paper, or at your keyboard nowadays, to showing my age, and by the way, if you need to Google stuff, or even better yet, talk to someone you trust who knows more about it than you, and they can point you in the right direction.
Look at Stephen A. What the fuck is this public service announcement shit that Max Kellerman is doing?
Or maybe give you some relevant facts, or even clarify your thinking by editing the flow of your thoughts. even to clarify your thinking to yourself. I highly recommend that. I think that's worthwhile.
I'll tell you
and
what I
by the
highly
way,
recommend.
after you do that, you also might find that you are more able to
I agree with Will Kane. Read and before you write anything, read so that you actually know what you're writing about.
discuss it publicly.
I recommend don't feel, think, don't write, read.
Agreed.
I recommend both.
Okay.
You can feel and think. They're not mutually exclusive.
Well, thank God you said both, because that was a long answer. But thank God you recommended both. I agree with Will. Read first.
All
Educate yourself as much as you possibly can.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Once again, this is why Stephen A. has Will Kane on the show, because he has to counterbalance this, this nut job, this ADD having nut job, Max Kellerman, allegedly.
True, but that doesn't mean everybody can articulate their position.
Yeah, we're going to read, we're going to write, and all I know is I would buy the Colin Kaepernick book, and we will leave it at that.
We know that you're going to buy the book because you're an agent of chaos. We already know that. After Colin Kaepernick came down through his Twitter or whatever social media platform he came through that, and he was congratulating women on Women's Month, that's when Molly Karam changed her views on him. Because before that, she was against him. But anyway. All right, so now let's see what Skip and Shannon have to say about the Colin Kaepernick book deal.
ESPN reports that Colin Kaepernick has been shopping his story to book publishers in recent weeks. The New York Post reported Kaepernick signed a book deal worth over $1 million, but other reports say a deal has not been signed yet. Shannon, is this a good idea or a bad idea?
I think it's a good idea, Skip.
No shit. We all know you're going to say a good idea, Shannon.
He has a very interesting story. Colin Kaepernick's life is not the last 14 months of it. You're talking about a young man that was born to a biracial child, born to a white mother, adopted by an all-white family, and to get to that, to the NFL Super Bowl, and to where he is now.
Is that supposed to be some type of great achievement, that he was adopted by a rather affluent Caucasian family, was able to go to a higher level school system, and then attend a university in Las Vegas? Is that supposed to be some type of hallmark of achievement? No, brother, I don't think so.
And I'm sure there's a very tough position to be in, because think about what he's doing, Skip. He's talking about he took a stance against social and racial injustice. And the family that raised him and took him in was all white. And
does that make you feel tingly inside, Shannon? Is that the life that you kind of wish that you could have led, as opposed to the life that you did lead growing up as a child in Georgia, with a house that, as you said, leaked through the roof, and a poor grandmother and grandfather? Is that why you like Kaepernick so much? Because you kind of wish that you were him, that you were the one leading this so-called protest, and that you had grown up in the affluent lifestyle that he grew up in? And look, don't get me wrong, it's tough to be an NFL quarterback no matter what your upbringing is. But Shannon is trying to imply that what Colin accomplished by becoming an NFL quarterback was tougher due to his upbringing. And no, actually the opposite would be true. It's far more difficult for a Jameis Winston or a Cam Newton to come to the NFL, no matter how, and they're both Heisman winners, than a Colin Kaepernick, for the simple reason that both of those guys, I'm sure at some point in their football playing career, were told that they should switch positions. I'm sure that Cam Newton and Jameis Winston were told that, you'd be better at tight end, or have you considered wide receiver? All right, these are things that normally happen to so-called black quarterbacks at some point in their life.
A lot of what's going on in America, not all, but a lot of it, the history of America, the whites played a major role in that.
Well, Shannon, I think that it's kind of strange that you want to create conversation with Caucasians when you claim that a lot of the history of America is predicated on, quote unquote, the whites. One would think that you, looking at your standards and your viewpoint, I'm only talking about your standards and your viewpoint, which is that you want to have an open dialogue with them, that you would not lead the conversation with quote-unquote stereotyping of all white people. I'm not talking about my views or anybody else's views. I'm talking about Shannon Sharpe right now. What he has stated in the past is that he wants to open up communication and have a conversation with the Caucasian to alleviate a lot of the racial issues in America and make America better. One would think that he would at least be well-versed enough to know and understanding enough to know that you can't say the whites. You would have to say a certain portion of Caucasians who own slaves, per se. Let me say this again. I've said this numerous times already. Most of these white people in America are the descendants of white trash. All right? They didn't own slaves. All right? Going into the 90th percentile, most of these white people did not own slaves. They're white trash. All right? And a lot of them today are still white trash, to be quite frank with you. Go to West Virginia and a lot of these other states around America where they're talking about the quote-unquote opioid national emergency. All right? They're trash. Them people that marched in Charlottesville with the tiki torches, they're trash. They didn't own no damn slave.
So imagine him, and imagine how his family, and sometimes I get this. I go through this a lot because I know, had it not been from the kindness of a lot of white people when I was growing up, my grandmother had to borrow money to pay bills. She had to borrow money so I could go on a 4-H trip or whatever. And she would always tell the guy whose name was Joe Tatum. She called him. She was older than he was. She called him Mr. Joe. Say, Mr. Joe, them boys will pay you back when they start working this summer. So I understand it because not all, and I'm very careful, Skip and Joy, you know this. I'm very careful to never say all or every. I'm talking about bad.
Okay, then you got to specify that, brother, because you said the white people before.
And there's good.
And I'm just talking about his platform. Shannon Sharpe has a platform, and the liberal internet revolutionary blacks, they have a platform where they claim that they want to open up dialogue with the Caucasian. All right?
Good and there's bad in every race, religion, and whatever. But Colin Kaepernick really has a very unique story to tell. And I think he's writing this book, Skip, because I think he's come to the realization that his NFL career is over.
Well, shit, I could have told him that last year. Look, unless there's some storyline that they're trying to swing where they're going to bring Kaepernick back, which I don't see at all, it would totally cripple their league. He's done. And this is why I stated in the last couple of videos that I did on him that the real reason why he's trying to bring the lawsuit against the NFL is to cripple the CBA and to cripple the NFL. Okay? Bottom line. There's no way in the world that you tell them you're trying to get a job back in the NFL and you're suing them for collusion.
He's like, I threw my last pass in January, and free agency started 2 months later, and I didn't get a call until maybe May or June.
Well, maybe that's why you shouldn't have opted out.
Maybe even July. Here we are. If I didn't get an opportunity 2 months after I threw my last pass, what makes me think I'm going to get one 16 months later? And then,
well, if you got a call in May or June or July, then how come you didn't accept that call? That kind of disproves collusion, doesn't it?
And then now he gets to tell his story because we all wanted him to sit down. But I think a lot of it had to do with him being afraid how it would be edited, how it would be cut, how it would make him look. Now he gets to tell his story. This is verbatim, what he's thinking, what led him to, when did this epiphany happen?
Well, shit, he don't got to tell his story. You've been telling it for the last year. It's going to be the Colin Kaepernick story written by Shannon Sharpe.
What led him to do what he did?
Well, we already know that, his woman.
And how is he dealing with it now? So I think he has a very unique story. Colin Kaepernick is not 14 months. Colin Kaepernick is a 29-year-old young man. And here's a guy that came into a situation adopted by white parents as a biracial child, works his way to the NFL, starts a Super Bowl, and 4 years later, he can't find a job in the NFL. So I think he has a very compelling story to tell.
He does.
In a 29-year time frame.
His backstory is about as fascinating as you can. It's almost so good that Hollywood wouldn't believe it if
Yes.
you tried to sell it as a screenplay.
Correct.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? His backstory is so good that Hollywood wouldn't believe it. What is Skip really saying there? Almost that is contrived.
Correct.
Which is why when I heard last night that the first report was 1 million, I thought, 1 million?
Yeah.
I mean, this is like 5 million at least,
Right.
right?
Yes.
I know that people don't buy books the way they used to buy books and read books, but all I can say is I would buy this one and I would read this one.
Yes.
Because I would love to know about, through his eyes, what he saw in his childhood, especially being raised by the white family.
Right.
What was it through the eyes of a black child being raised by an all-white family? It's fascinating.
Yes.
And
Well, a lot of people could tell that story today because a lot of black children are being adopted by Caucasians, particularly liberal Caucasians. You have a lot of black male children who are being adopted by homosexual white males for whatever reason. You put two and two together on that one.
And I know he could tell that story well.
Yes.
And then I want to know what's happened since San Francisco. What happened when he went to visit the Seahawks? What happened? Why did it all fall apart with the Ravens? What's the backstory? What was going on behind the scenes? What about the collusion lawsuit? What's the smoking gun that his attorney alleged? I don't know. Maybe we'll never hear about it, but it could wind up in this book.
Correct.
Y'all gonna hear about it the same day that they figure out who sprayed nigger on LeBron James's front gate.
Correct. Hope. And I have mixed emotions because Colin's silence has made him a little bit of a man of mystery over the last year, and his mystique.
Yeah, sound like a agent or a spy, a man of mystery.
Has grown, but hey, you can't take away from the fact he was on the cover of Time magazine. He had national impact.
Yes, all high-level social engineering pawns are on the cover of Time magazine. As I've stated in the past, oftentimes what they'll do to the overt Luciferians is they will strategically place their head underneath the M in Time to make it look like two devil horns protruding out of the top of their head.
He became, to me, an historical figure as the face of a movement that was crucial at a point of time in this country's growth. Dare I say growth? I don't know if it's growth, but in its evolution. And I have mixed emotions about that because I've talked to so many people around the league who wanted Colin to speak. The last time he actually spoke publicly, I'm pretty sure it was the last game he played for the 49ers.
Yes.
And a lot of NFL people interpreted his silence as a signal that he had moved on with his life.
Well, I mean, shit. What were you supposed to think? First off, the man opted out of his contract, and then he does not show any real overt interest in playing football again. He co-signs a lot of inflammatory statements aimed at the NFL or at the quote-unquote powers that be. As we know, he has the right to do that, but you also have to understand that your perception is directly related to your viability as an employee. So these are all things that have to be considered.
That he was becoming full-time passion into being an activist and a crusader.
You know why they knew that, Skip? They thought that because they had moved on. They had moved him on with his life. Because here's the thing, Skip. No matter what we think, and you and I both agree that he had profound impact. But that's not how the owners look at him. The owners look at him and say, "You're the reason that our
I think they look at him as having profound negative impact."
Right.
Yes.
And so they're looking at him in a different light than a lot of Americans are looking at Colin Kaepernick.
No, sir. They're looking at him in the same light that a lot of Americans are looking at Colin Kaepernick. Okay? They're looking at him in the same light. That's why they don't want him back. All right? Because the reason why they're looking at him so negatively is because he has impacted their ratings. The reason why he has impacted their ratings is because their main constituency no longer wants to view the NFL because they don't want to be inundated with the give me a hug movement. That's why. So no, you cannot say that the perceptions of the NFL owners are disparate from the average so-called American that watches the NFL.
All they care about is
the bottom line. So there's like, hold on. Had you not done what you've done, we wouldn't be here. But I think a lot of that needs to be pointed at the guy that's in the Oval Office. Because what...
Now, remember I did a video where Skip finally flipped on Shannon and he said, look, you keep blaming Trump for everything. And I stated this is what these so-called pro-blacks and liberal blacks is what they do. They want to blame Trump for everything. If their heat is not turning on, if their refrigerator breaks down, they want to blame Donald Trump for it. And now, now Shannon is trying to blame Donald Trump. But part of it is partially accurate because Shannon Sharpe is noticing something that I stated originally, which is that what Donald Trump did was to purposefully manipulate the meatheads in the NFL into coming out of their boroughs so that he could make the situation so inflammatory, so corrosive that they had to deal with it right away. All right. So once again, that's what Trump did.
While there were only small pockets, it was him opening his mouth, calling them FSOBs that got this thing reignited.
It did.
So they're still pointing their anger at a guy that started it. But the race was almost over because there were only a handful of guys. What
do you mean the race is almost over, Shannon? I thought that you wanted the protest to keep going. I'm confused, Shannon. Did you want the protest to end or did you want it to keep going, bruh? Oh boy. I tell you, these liberal blacks are something else. They are so fucking confused. They don't understand or see anything for what it is until the very end. Now Shannon is starting to realize, and I believe that he's speaking like this because he's gotten word from what transpired in the owner-player meetings. The owners are not fucking with these players, man. They're not fucking with these dudes. And these players are woefully ill-equipped to have serious conversations with businessmen because they're too emotional. So I believe that Shannon Sharpe has gotten word from a lot of the things that are transpiring in these meetings, and he knows that there is no hope for this protest to make any ground in the quest to get that hug from the elite Caucasian.
You had the Michael Bennett's, you had the Eric Reed, but for the most part, Skip, everybody else, you didn't really hear about it. Mm-mm. But then he said what he said while he was in Alabama, and then poof. And then everybody, they're still condemning the protest, but nobody's really rushed to condemn him. Mr. Jones, Jerry Jones, won't even touch it. Mm-hmm. He don't even mention the president. I know the president, known him for 20 years. Well, if you've known him for 20 years, this is what I can't understand, Skip. This is what I can't understand. Jerry Jones, Mr. Kroenke, the St. Louis Rams owner, the Snyders, they fought so hard to make sure Donald Trump could not buy the Buffalo Bills. Yet they love him so much. It's like, we love you, but we don't want you in our club because we know what you are.
Mr. Kroenke.
Because they didn't want him in the club because he didn't have the ability to affect their business, Shannon. Hello? When he was just a private citizen, they did not want to affiliate with him because they understood that he was outlandish. Now that he's in the White House, he has the power to tax them. Okay? He has the power to levy them, Shannon. Once again, this is all about business. This is why the so-called pro-black and the internet revolutionary, they always stay confused and emotionally unstable. They just don't get look at the look Shannon got on his face.
Mr. Kraft.
Yeah, Mr. Kraft. They fought so hard. They went the extra mile to make sure the Pagulas could buy the Buffalo Bills, but they heap praise on it. It's like, I like you. I just don't like you in our club.
Remember, he fought them with the USFL.
Yeah, but a lot of these owners were nowhere around then. Jerry wasn't even around then.
Yeah, that's true. Most of these guys went around. The reason why they didn't allow Trump to buy the Buffalo Bills is because they viewed him as a wild card. They viewed him as a guy who was, a little too out of pocket. All these owners do the same things that Trump does, and they agree with his ideologies. They just do it behind closed doors. See, the thing with Trump is that he's unfiltered and he says what he really feels. All right? All these guys believe in grabbing a broad by the pussy. It's just Trump is the only one who'll say it.
No. Mr. Kraft wasn't nowhere even be thought of back then. This was like 80, it started like 85, 86, 87, I think. And I think it got settled for $1. Mm-hmm. So a lot of these owners were nowhere to be seen, but they know who he is and what he's capable of. So now the Buffalo Bills just sold like what, 2013, 2014? So most of these owners, with the exception, maybe I think even Mr. Shad Khan was around. So everybody that's an owner now was there then, and they staunchly fought to keep him out. We like you. Hey, that's my dog. but you ain't inviting them over to your house. See, he one of these friends, Skip. You know, you got these friends in college. You love them, they funny. They do all kind of crazy stuff. They burp at the dinner table, pass gas in the elevator. And when you're in the elevator with a crowd of people, and everybody, but then you take him home, and he's burping at the table. He's chewing with his mouth open, and you're like, oh my goodness. But that's what you were that's what you liked about it. See, the very thing that you like about a person will turn around and make you despise him in the end.
It don't got nothing to do with that, bro. All it has to do with is that right now they fear him because he can control how their business is being taxed. That's all it's about. And in regards to why they did not allow him to buy a team, it's because he's too out of pocket. That's it.
And so, hey, I would buy Cap's story. I've gotten to know Cap over the last 14 months. Kept talking to him, and I didn't know it. Met him, I met him a couple of times during the when he was playing, and I was at the other network. But I got a chance to know him a little bit and see, peek behind the curtain and see why he did what he did. But that would be very interesting. I'm anxious to see because it's hard. Like I said, Skip, I deal with that sometimes because I knew that there were some white people that did some very good things for my grandmother and treated us well. And then we weren't always, I wasn't always liked. Everybody doesn't like Shannon Sharpe in Glenville. I understand that. But, and I'm sure growing up as a child, being the only black child in a white family, he got looks.
Of course he got looks. That's why he went through that big identity crisis. And this whole thing is also a manifestation of his need to, pick a side. And, a lot of people like him, they overcompensate by going way, way, way too hard. And you'll find that a lot, especially with the people who have a racial identity disorder, whether it's people like him or, what's his name, W.E.B. Du Bois or Angela Davis. A lot of times you see it with people who are so-called light-skinned or multiracial. They tend to go a little bit too hard. Huey P. Newton, and when I say too hard, it means that they try to out-black everybody. You also see it with Chris Broussard. It is an issue. I'm not into colorism per se, but those things do happen, and oftentimes people who are light, extremely light, or who are so-called multiracial, they will try to quote-unquote out-black people.
That's not their child. Like, whoa, how did this? And then maybe he got treated one way when he was with the family. Maybe he got treated an entirely different way. Because if you see a black child, you don't automatically assume that he got white parents. So it's a very compelling story, and it's deeper than 14 months.
It is.
This is a 29-year journey. And if he wants to tell it, let him tell it, because no one can tell it quite like he can.
And all I know for sure is the one time Colin really spoke was after that preseason game at San Diego. Remember, we hadn't launched yet here on Undisputed. You and I were texting that night about how it was going. And after that game, he laid it out powerfully. What his mission was, what his goal was, what this was all about. And because of that, and that's the last time he really spoke on the issue, because of that, I would definitely buy this book.
Yeah, I'm with you, Skip. $1 million seems a little young, like a little low, considering the impact that he's had across the world with these protests. And
what impact? What the fuck are you talking about, man? Joy Taylor, just knock it off. But like I said, she's a woman. She's an agent of chaos. Of course she's going to co-sign it.
And the lasting effect that it's had on the news cycle, it seems like it would be a...
When did President Obama...
Did you hear what she said? She said the lasting effect that it's had on the news cycle. All right? Like I tell you, brothers, the media is all about narrative and news cycle. It has nothing to do with the truth. They like these things to keep going and going and going and going. Now, on this episode of Undisputed, this segment came, basically like an hour into the show. Why is that? Because they knew that this does not reflect well on Kaepernick. Now, had it been some type of racism that was revealed or exposed, it would have led the show. Because these shows are all about promoting race mongering and black male victimhood. They don't want to promote black male rulership ideologies. They want to constantly promote black male victimhood. That's why when Michael Bennett got exposed as a liar, you didn't hear peep out of this show at all.
Obama got like 65 million. I'm not saying he should get
I mean,
but maybe
but
five.
because we haven't heard from him.
Yeah, he's an enigma.
This is...
Well, the reason why he only got $1 million is because he's getting the deal through One World Publishing, which is a which is an imprint under Random House and is ran by a black homosexual publisher named Chris Jackson. Okay, I'm sure they don't got no damn $5 million in their budget to give to Colin Kaepernick.
This is the story.
Yeah.
Who's the bigger?
But anyway, this is the coverage of the Colin Kaepernick book deal. I'm sure that there's some more on the horizon with this guy. They're going to keep pushing this storyline to its limit. But anyway, peace.